The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening. I'm Shane Gebauer, General Manager of BrushyMtnBeeFarm. I'd like to welcome you all here this evening for Making Sense of Medications. As I said in the registration, my goal tonight is not to make recommendations as to what you should or should not be using. There's a lot of personal preference that goes into deciding what one is going to apply to a hive, whether it be a medication or otherwise. And that's really a decision that only you all can make for yourselves. My goal tonight is to give you a brief overview of the various medications out there, what they are used for, and try and sort them out a little bit. As you look through a catalog or a website, there are certainly a lot of options to choose from, and which one's going to work best for you. I can't, as I said, I can't tell you that, but I can tell you how they're used, what some pros and cons are based on the literature, and we can go from there. I'm not going to touch on IPM techniques. I may sort of make reference to them occasionally, but I'm not going to focus on those during this talk. This talk's about medications. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and begin. This is a photo that I've stolen from Kim Flottam. It seemed appropriate as an opening slide for this talk. And as we go through this, I want to emphasize the fact that I'll be giving sort of some very general application guidelines. In other words, how do you apply a particular medication? But I'll make a point of saying right now that the label is the law, and that you should read and follow the directions that are included with the medication that you've received, and you should understand those before applying it. Any deviation from that label technically is a violation of the law, and so you should be aware of that. That these are just sort of some real general steps that are taken to administer these various products. For me to give you step-by-step instructions that are on the label, we'd be here for a very long time, and as it is, I'm afraid we might be here for a very long time. So with all that said, let's get to it. This is our outline for this evening. Obviously, that's not quite true. This is a rather complicated table, but this is available, as you can see, on our resource section on our website, and it does contain a lot of the information that we'll be going over this evening. It also has, again, some very general application statements and treatment periods and things like that, and it's a good resource for you all to be aware of. But this sort of typifies why we're having this conversation this evening, because obviously this is a rather complicated table, and there's very good reason why medications are a daunting subject for a lot of folks, and why we're here this evening. So let's get started. We'll talk a little bit about varroa control, hard chemicals, soft chemicals. We'll talk about Nosema, as well as I've got some others for wax moth and things like that. So let's first start with hard chemicals, and the first one being Apistan. The active ingredient is in Apistan is tau fluvalinate. It's worth mentioning that when Apistan first came out on the market in the late 80s, it was a different form of fluvalinate, and I'm not exactly sure when it changed to this particular version of fluvalinate, but this one actually is a little bit more toxic. The LD50, which simply means the lethal dose for 50% of the organism, is actually much lower than the original the original version of fluvalinate. It's applied by their strips. You can see these brown strips right here. Your honey supers must be off the hive. This is a varroa treatment. Your honey supers must be off the hive, and you want to apply 1 strip per 5 frame of bees. And so in this case, there are 10 frames of bees, probably because there may be 5 in this top box, and you can see down here there's just a little bit of a corner of the bottom box, and so they're applying a total of 2 strips. So 1 strip per hive. Generally speaking, you apply 2 strips per hive. I'm sorry, 1 strip per 5 frame of bees. Generally speaking, you apply 2 frames or 2 strips per hive. The treatment period is 41 days, and it must not exceed 56 days, which is 8 weeks. It's not recommended for use more than twice a year, and the reason for that is that 1, you can get excessive buildup in the wax, and 2, the mites can actually develop resistance to this product, to the talfluvalinate. And in fact, we see that in pockets throughout the country where bees have, or rather the mites have developed resistance to this product, so it's not nearly as effective as it used to be. However, if you have mites that are not resistant, it still is quite effective. Some pros and cons of Apistan. It's a very simple application. You get the pack, you take out your strips, and you insert them down between the frames. Ideally, you want them right on the outside of your brood chamber. The bees must come in contact with these strips, and as they do, they pick up the pesticide, and and the mites are exposed to it. It's not weather dependent, within reason. Obviously, if your bees are clustered because it's cold outside, they're not going to come in contact with the strips. But as long as they're not clustered and moving about the hive, you will have a high degree of efficacy, anywhere between 95 and 99% efficacy can be recorded with this product. Some cons, as I've already mentioned, resistant mites. What happens is these strips get applied to a hive, and they're not pulled out, and so people have often left them in there over winter. And so there's this low level of the fluvalinate present, and it actually selects the mites that are then resistant to that product. And so we see these pockets of resistance, and so the hazard here is if you don't know you've got resistant mites, you apply these strips, you think, okay, I'm treating my bees, all is good, everything is right with the world. You go back, as you should, 42 days later, you remove those strips, and you think, great, everything's good. But in reality, if you've got these resistant mites, you haven't done anything to treat that colony. That those mites are still just as happy as can be in that colony and still wreaking havoc on the health of your bees. So it's important to monitor your mite drop, not just with Apistan, but with all products, to know that they are actually working and know that they are actually having some consequence on the mite population. Now, it's also worth mentioning here that you should have an understanding of what your mite count is prior to treatment. If you don't have many mites in your colony and you apply a treatment and you don't see many mites dropping onto your sticky board, you may conclude that it's not working. But in reality, you didn't have many mites dropping before the treatment. And so your treatment is actually working. It's just that you don't have much in there to begin with. As the opposite, you may have some mites dropping off. You apply a treatment, and suddenly you see this tremendous fall of the mites, this tremendous drop onto your sticky board, and know that it's working quite well. So it's important to know not only what's happening during your treatment, but also prior, and then also after as well. Now, let's get back to Apistan. So we've got the resistant mites as a potential con. It still is very effective in a lot of places, but this is a hazard. The other thing is accumulation in the wax. And a lot of research for all the hard chemicals, frankly, up to this point, have focused on lethal doses. How much needs to be present to actually kill bees, larvae, eggs, etc. But now, as a result of CCD and all the research that's going on in the bee industry, we're taking a look at sublethal effects because what we're seeing with CCD is a slow decline in the population. Well, actually, it's not that slow, but a decline in the population. And so are these pesticides, whether it be Apistan, whether it be something illegal, Checkmate, whatever, are these having effects at the sublethal dose? Now, let me be very, very clear here. I am not trying to imply or insinuate that chemicals, pesticides, are the cause for CCD. All I'm saying is that because of CCD, they've looked at this as a possibility. And so as a result, we're seeing some data coming out that sublethal effects may have a consequence on queen rearing, that may have a consequence on drone fertility, as well as overall bee health. And so that's why it's listed here as a concern. And then I've got this other category that's sort of bits of information, and I guess it doesn't really fall into a pro or a con, but may be of interest, that it requires 2 trips to the hive, 1 trip to put the strips in, another to pull them out, and then also a price per hive. And this is just based on if you buy a box of 10 out of our catalog, it works out to be $4, and also it assumes 2 strips per hive. It's $4.75 per hive. And I've tried to present that information consistently throughout the rest so that you have a sense of comparison. If the almighty dollar is your driving factor, then that might be a consideration. If trips to the hive, time is an issue, that may be a factor, but also the pros and cons. So that's Apistan. Let's talk a little bit about Checkmate. The active ingredient is coumaphos, and it's an organophosphate. It was originally Section 18, which means it was an emergency registration. And this is largely in response to the developed resistance to Apistan that Checkmate was brought onto the market as a Section 18. Although that was last year or 2 years ago, it received a full Section 3 registration, which is general approval. It is effective against Varroa as well as small hive beetle. Again, it's a strip. Here is 1 strip actually, which has been cut in half right here and stapled onto this plastic Corex sheet. Now, this is how you apply it if you're treating for small hive beetle. Basically, it's think of a piece of cardboard where 1 layer of the cardboard has been peeled away, and so we're seeing this corrugation here. You set this down on your bottom board with these strips facing down, and as the bees chase the beetles, they sort of scurry into these corrugations to hide from the bees. They come in contact with the Checkmate strip and are killed that way. If you're treating this if you're using this to treat Varroa, you would take 1 of these full strips, so you wouldn't cut it in half, 1 strip per 5 frame of bees, just like the Apistan. Generally speaking, you'll be applying 2 strips per hive. And again, it's not recommended for use more than twice a year, again, because of potential accumulation in the wax, and not more than 4 times a year for small hive beetle. So both for accumulation in the wax as well as, again, possible developed resistance. And in fact, now we are seeing resistance to Checkmate as well. So that's a problem. It's not recommended for use in cell builders. So this is for queen rearing. And And again, the reason for that is the possible impact to the queens. If there's coumaphos in that wax, how is that going to affect the queen development? Will it result in an inferior queen? And they have done studies where coumaphos in wax will affect the vigor and the quality of a queen. There was a study done originally by Reg Wilbanks, Jeff Pettis, Nita Collins, and there might have been one other person on that study years ago, where they basically inoculated wax with known concentrations of coumaphos and raised queens out, and sure enough, the ones that had the higher concentrations of coumaphos were inferior queens to those that were raised with clean wax. So that sort of brings us to our pros and cons. I've already alluded a little bit to the cons, but again, it's a simple application. It's not weather dependent. Again, as long as they can break their cluster, you have a high degree of efficacy. If the mites are not resistant, again, you can see up to 95 to 99% efficacy. But the cons, again, we're seeing mites that are resistant to the coumaphos, and again, the accumulation in the wax, the sublethal effects of the coumaphos on the overall health of a colony, whether it be the queen, drones, or workers. There's, again, 2 trips to the hive, once to put them in, once to take them out, and it works out to be about $7.30 per hive, assuming 2 strips per hive. One which I put in here, but chances are most of you will not come in contact with anytime in the near future. Hivastan. Hivastan is new this year. It's a Section 18 registration. It's an emergency registration. Its active ingredient is fenproxamate, and you apply this in this tub is a gel. It's just full of a gel material, and you take a scoop, about 8 ounces, and apply it to a piece of wax paper, cardboard, anything, and sort of make a patty on that piece of paper, and place it on the top bars of the bottom box if you're running 2 stories, a 2-story brood chamber. It's not recommended for temperatures over 100 degrees, and the reason for that is it's a gel, and when you get conditions that hot, it actually begins to melt and sort of run off of the paper. It's a 6-week treatment period. So you're looking at 42 days for this application. The reason why most of you will not come in contact with this is because of the cons. That tub is $200, and it treats, I think it's 50 colonies, which I suspect most of you listening in are below that number of colonies, well below it. And so you're going to be spending a lot of money for a lot of pesticide that will go bad, essentially, before you have an opportunity to use it. So let's go over some of the pros of it, though, in case some are interested. It's a very simple application. Scoop it up, put it on the paper, flatten that out into a patty, and set it on the top bars. It's not weather dependent, high degree of efficacy, and it's so new, it just came out this year, that we haven't seen any resistance to this product. Cons, again, you're getting a lot of pesticide for more than what most of you will need. It's a complex ordering process. Let me explain that a little bit. You can't simply, well, you call us up and place an order, but the company that produces this requires that we send you a waiver. You have to sign that waiver, send it back to us. We submit it to the company, and it drop ships directly from the manufacturer of the product. And the reason for that really is this last point right here, that when you first apply this, usually within the first 48 to 72 hours after application, you actually see an increased mortality in bees. And so they require that you sign this waiver to simply acknowledge that you understand this and won't hold them or us liable. A con is that according to their one of their employees is that it's lipophilic. In other words, it likes fats, and beeswax is a fat, and so you can get accumulation of this product in the wax. We don't necessarily know what the consequences of that may be. There's still some studies going on in that regard. The other 2 trips to the hive, actually you could probably get away with just 1, although it's advisable to take 2, and the reason for that is that the bees, if they dispose of that gel within 6 weeks, they will also shred the paper and take care of that for you as well. However, I recommend 2 trips because if there is some residual gel on that paper, you need to remove it after 6 weeks. And so that's why there's 2 trips to a hive. Price per hive is $4. So that that's the $200 tub, but it treats 50 colonies. Let's talk a little bit about soft chemicals. Superside is the first up. It's one of the only products that's registered for use during a honey flow. The active ingredient is sucrose oxygenate. It's a very safe product, so much so that the EPA doesn't require a lot of the standard testing that it requires for many other pesticides. It's considered a biochemical rather than a synthetic pesticide, which is why it's in sort of the soft chemical category, which is a somewhat arbitrary category, frankly. The distinction, generally speaking, is a hard chemical is one which is sort of synthetic in nature, whereas the soft chemicals tend to be sort of bioagents, biochemical, organic, naturally occurring type of pesticides. Its mode of action is it essentially dissolves the wax layer that covers the mites, and so they sort of dry out, they dehydrate. You mix this in it's a concentrated solution, so you take 1.5 tablespoons and mix that to a gallon of water, and you have to go into your hive, and you need to spray down every single frame 3 times, separated by 7 to 10 days. And so my experience with this, and from what I've heard from most people that have tried it, is that because of the labor involved, rarely do they get to that 3rd application to actually have a full treatment. So that sort of brings us to our pros and cons, and I guess I jump down here to the very first con, which is that it is incredibly labor intensive, and its efficacy is mixed, and the reason for that is that it only treats it will only affect mites in which the solution comes in contact. So any foragers that are out and about will not be sprayed down, and thus they will not receive a treatment. And so any mites that they may be carrying will not be affected by your treatment. So timing is important when trying to reach a high efficacy with this product. If you go into your hive at say 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a sunny, warm day, chances are you're not going to have a high degree of efficacy because you're going to have a large number of foragers out looking for nectar, pollen, water, etc., and thus they will not be treated. And if you do all 3 treatments in that manner, you will miss a lot of bees and thus a lot of mites, and so your efficacy will be low. So that's why it's sort of mixed. The pros, it's very safe. You can use it during a honey flow, no developed resistance. I should mention that label is the law here, but what a lot of people do is actually, if they've got packages of bees, they will mist the package of bees down with a Superside solution, because you usually mist your bees down anyway before installing them, with a sugar water solution. Well, I know people that mist down their bees with a Superside solution, so that way any mites that may be on those bees, and of course you don't have any foragers, you don't have any mites hiding under capped brood, they're all on the surface of the bees, you essentially can treat your packages before installing them. Yes, packages have mites. Anyone who tells you otherwise, frankly, is not telling the truth. Despite our best efforts to treat colonies in which packages are produced from, they still will have mites, unfortunately. So, again, label's the law. That's a deviation from the label, but I know people that are doing that. The other, it takes 3 trips to the hive, but price per hive is about 88 cents. That's a pretty good dollar figure. But the what's your time worth? Incredibly labor intensive. All right. Soft chemical number 2, Mite-Away 2. It's an organic acid. It's formic acid is the active ingredient, which naturally occurs in honey. You need to have daytime temperatures between 50 and 79 degrees. Now, this is daytime temperatures. And frankly, the first week is the most important for those temperature ranges. It's a 21-day treatment period. It's a bagged pad, and here it is on a colony. Inside this bucket are 10 pads, and each pad is bagged in a clear bag to begin with, and then in that clear bag is this pad which is in a blue bag. Does that make sense? So you've got a pad which is soaked with formic acid, which is in a blue bag, and then that whole thing is in a clear bag. You cut the clear bag and put the pad, while still in the blue bag, on top of the hive. Now, what you can't see in this picture is underneath this pad are 2 sticks that are running in this direction across the top bars. And those sticks are basically a 1/2 inch square by 4 inches long. And what that does is it holds the pad. It creates a space between the top bars right here, between the top bars and the pad. It creates an airspace. And then you have to apply this spacer, which is 1.5 inches tall, on top, and then put your inner cover and outer cover on top of this. And what you end up with is you've got now a 1/2 inch airspace below the pad, and once you apply the spacer, you'll have a 1/2 inch airspace above the pad, and that allows for the bees to fan the fumes and create good circulation as they try to evaporate the formic acid and drive the fumes from the colony. And as they do so, what happens is the formic concentration inside the colony actually does increase. But they've done studies where they've looked at formic in the honey and wax before a treatment, because it naturally occurs there, so it is there and detectable. They looked at that concentration before treatment, during a treatment, and after treatment. And sure enough, during a treatment, the concentration went up. But 2 weeks after treatment, it was right back to its starting point. And so what happens is you create sort of this fume chamber where you're getting this treatment of mites both on bees and under the caps as well, which is nice. And it's a 21-day treatment period. One of the things, before I advance to the next slide, that I'll point out, which you can probably see right here, is the skull and crossbones, which frankly scare a lot of people. And again, it seems like I'm starting with the cons first. So that's a con. The fear of acid burns. That formic acid can cause irritations to the skin. It can, if you get a concentrated enough dose on your skin, it can actually cause a little blister. The concentration that's in this pad, generally speaking, is not that high. What happened was, I guess it was probably, gosh, it might be 10 years ago now, there was a beekeeper in Florida, I believe it was, that was working with liquid formic and spilled it on himself and actually inhaled enough fumes that he scorched the inside of his lungs and died. And so that fear remains today. Now, this is not liquid formic. This is a pad soaked with formic, so you don't have this liquid running about. But that said, the label does require that you have eye protection as well as a respirator. And that is a con for this, that you need extra, it should be plural, extra pieces of equipment. You need the sticks to elevate the pad. You need the extra rim to elevate your inner cover, as well as the goggles and the respirator. I'll mention that in Canada, they do not, if we have any folks from Canada listening in, you do not need a respirator in Canada. So be aware of that. It is weather sensitive. If I jump back to that slide, we've got temperatures between 50 and 79 degrees, especially during that first week. So it's sometimes difficult because if you check the long-term forecast, we know those weather folks, they can't predict it much farther than a day or so in advance with any sort of accuracy. So you look at the long-term forecast, you think you got a good window, you apply it, and lo and behold, the storm front comes through, and now you're down to the lower end of that temperature range, and you're not getting the formic evaporating as quickly as it should, so you're not getting as high an efficacy. So that's one of the hazards with this product. Now, they have done studies where you can get 95% efficacy when the conditions are right with this product. So it does work under the conditions which are stated on the label. One of the real benefits is that you don't get the contamination in the honey, that you get the formic is naturally occurring, and it returns to baseline levels after the treatment's been removed. It works for both varroa and tracheal mites, which is nice, so you don't have to double up on your medications. There's no developed resistance. And of all the medications, varroa medications out there, it's got the shortest treatment period, 21 days. So that's a nice asset too if you're trying to sort of thread the needle between honey flows or something like that. One thing that I should mention, this is true of all the medications that we've talked about so far, and the next few that we'll discuss after this one, that you should wear gloves when handling these products, whether it be Hivast, Checkmate, the Mite Away to ensure that you don't get any of the active ingredient on your skin. It requires 2 trips to the hive, one to put the pad on and one to pull the pad off. Its price per hive is $3.95. And I put this on here. I didn't put this on as a pro because the data at this point, is not yet published, and we're still working on trying to collect some information. But what we found is that there's this stimulatory effect, that on the label it will say that you may see some what they call brood burning, which is basically right below that pad when it's first applied. If there's brood directly below it, the fumes may be concentrated enough that it could actually kill some of the brood right there underneath the pad. We call that, a nice way of saying that is brood burning. And what we see is that after the treatment, that the bees try to overcompensate for that loss, or they try and compensate for that loss, and in doing so they actually overcompensate. And so colonies that have been treated with Mite Away 2 actually have more brood area after treatment than control colonies. So we see this stimulatory effect, so we're actually getting increased brood rearing, which is sort of nice because it's after treatment, which is under low mite conditions at that point. So that's sort of a nice benefit, but again, it's sort of down here under the other category, not under a pro, because we're still sort of trying to hash out the details of what's going on there. And also what we see is that we see an extended mite drop long after the period. And so we're thinking, too, that it somehow interferes with the mite's ability. It may not kill them outright, but it interferes with their ability to detect the cell that they should go into to reproduce. And so while the mite count may not, the mite drop may not spike as dramatically as a lot of other treatments, you have a prolonged mite drop and decreased reproduction in the mite after that treatment. Soft chemical. The next one, Apelifar. This is a mixture of essential oils, things like thymol, which is the primary ingredient, camphor oil, eucalyptol, and there's some menthol in there. And it's in a foam substance. So the application is, this is the way it comes, and this, admittedly, it can be confusing. In this pack it are 2 wafers, and here they are laid out on the pack. There's 1, and here's 2. The way to apply this to a colony is break each wafer into 4 pieces, and then take these 4 pieces and apply them around the brood chamber, above the brood chambers, or above the brood nest rather. So we're sort of, the brood nest is something like this, and so we've got these sort of toward the periphery of that brood nest and above it on the top bars. You need to do this, apply these 3 times, separated by 7 to 10 days, so you're looking at a treatment period on the longest to be about 30 days. And again, you need a certain temperature range. You need to about 65 to 95 degrees daytime highs. Now, if we look at these two, this one and the Mite-Away 2, if you're in the south, temperatures can be a funny thing during the summertime, trying to find a window to apply these. If you're in the north, you've got a little bit larger period to work with. If you're looking to treat in August in the south, this temperature range is a good one. But the Mite-Away 2, the 50 to 79, is not so good. So these two in conjunction would be a nice combination, using perhaps Mite-Away 2 in the spring and Apelifar in the fall, because the temperature range for Mite-Away 2, we can certainly find a window in the spring, and then in the fall, we're more conducive for the Apelifar. The temperature range is more conducive for Apelifar. The pros, it's very safe. It's a mixture of essential oils. There's no developed resistance. It's a shorter time period than the hard chemicals, but a little bit longer than or maybe a little bit longer than the Mite-Away 2. Again, it's weather sensitive. The temperature range that I mentioned, if you get fluctuations too hot, it'll evaporate too quickly and may agitate the bees. If it's too cool, it may not evaporate quickly enough. But studies have shown, again, that you can get 95+% efficacy with this product, so it is very effective. One con that I've heard with Apelifar is that you get a persistence of the thymol odor. There were some studies done in Europe as well as here in North America that looked at the residue of thymol in the hive after application, and found that while it was detectable by the nose, it made no significant contribution whatsoever to interrupt normal hive behavior or affect any of the products from the hive. The category of other, 3 trips to the hive to apply those wafers, and your cost per hive is about $5.39. Soft chemicals. Now we're on to menthol, which is for tracheal. So everything prior to this was for varroa. In the case of Mite-Away 2, it does treat tracheal. Apple Life VAR has some effectiveness against tracheal as well, but it's really designed for Varroa. Menthol will treat tracheal. You need to have temperatures above 70 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a 28-day, forgot to put day in there, 28-day treatment period. And you must have it off 14 days before you add honey supers. So again, that's sort of an opportunity for the residual menthol to sort of evaporate out of the colony before you add honey supers. Otherwise, you may end up with minty fresh honey. It takes 2 trips to the hive, 1 to apply it, and 2 to sort of pull off the bag that remains, or any leftover crystals. And the price per hive is $3.75. And again, this only treats tracheal, but it's menthol. It's not going to add any sort of residue to the colony. It evaporates out once the treatment's removed, and so it's a very safe product. We'll talk about fumagillin now and Nosema. This is an antibiotic. You mix it with corn syrup or sugar water, whatever it is you're feeding, and you want to mix in about 1.5 teaspoons per gallon of syrup. You want, in the springtime, to feed about 1 gallon to your colony. So you can just mix it up in your container and fill your feeder, whatever feeder you're using, but you want to feed about 1 gallon. In the fall, you want to feed about 2 gallons. And the reason why you want to feed more in the fall than the spring is because Nosema is a fungal disease that affects the digestive tract of the bee. Bees will not defecate, or try not to defecate in their colony. And so imagine now your bee confined to your home through the months of, we'll be generous and say November through February, and you can't get out to relieve yourself, except for maybe on that rare event when the temperature gets above 50. So you're in there, and now you've got a digestive tract problem. So that's why we feed more, to try and really clean those bees up and get them good and healthy prior to going to bed for winter. So 2 gallons in the fall. This is a rather expensive treatment, given that its sole use is for Nosema. Your price per hive is $2.99. That's assuming you're feeding 1 gallon in the spring. Or if it's fall, you're feeding twice as much, so it's $5.98 per hive. You know, all these things, frankly, they begin to add up. The miticides, this, menthol, if you're using that, it does get expensive. There's no doubt about it. This is one that it's difficult to sort of use IPM techniques to avoid these sorts of things. You can't, Nosema that is. You can use IPM techniques to alleviate your need for some of the miticides, but this one's a little bit more tricky because it often shows up in wintertime when the bees are bound to the colony, and so we're not really thinking about it all summer long. But some things that you can do to try and help, things that are a little bit cheaper, while these are not official medications, they are not registered through the EPA, there is a lot of anecdotal evidence out there to suggest that they have a great deal of benefit to the colony. And the first is Honeybee Healthy, which is a mixture of essential oils. This container right here that I'm picturing is a 16-ounce container, and it'll make 24 gallons of syrup, and it works out to be just over $1 per hive, which is a little bit more reasonable than the fumagillin. Now, again, this is not necessarily a treatment. There are no studies that I'm aware of that shows the efficacy of Honeybee Healthy as a treatment for Nosema compared to fumagillin. and it's not registered, but we do see that it has some benefits. And really, I think what's happening is that it stimulates feeding. And Nosema is a disease that sort of discourages feeding. And of course, if anything, any living organism is not eating, it's not going to be healthy. So if you can stimulate that organism to eat, it's more likely to be healthy. And if perhaps these essential oils are having some sort of cleansing effect, you're getting that benefit as well. I will say that one of the most well-known commercial beekeepers told us that this product saved his bees last year. And so to me, that was quite an endorsement from a well-respected beekeeper. The downside to it is that it's got spearmint oil, is it spearmint or lemongrass that's in it, that does sort of attract other bees and may increase robbing. I think actually it's got both of them, spearmint and lemongrass oil in there, and those attract other bees, and so you may get the increased risk of robbing, so you should be aware of that. Appa Herb is a new product this year. It's made from plant extracts, so it's similar to Honeybee Healthy in that sense. Admittedly, it's a little bit more difficult to apply. You have to mix up a solution. One packet makes enough to treat a little more than 3 colonies. So it works out to be about $3 a hive. And what you have to do is mix up the solution, and using a syringe, which you can get from a lot of farm supply stores, trickle about 50 cc's, 50 milliliters per hive down between the frames. And again, what that does is it gets the syrup with this stuff right on the bees. They have no choice but to ingest it. And again, you want to stimulate feeding. And so by basically covering them with this sugar solution that's got the Appa Herb in it, they have no choice but to eat it and stimulate that feeding. By ingesting the syrup, they get food into them, and the Appa Herb does cleanse them. Now, they have done studies with Appa Herb over in Europe and found it to be as effective. It is registered in Europe, and they found it to be as effective a treatment for Nosema as Fumagillin B. In the U.S., it's being marketed as a food supplement, a feeding stimulant that helps with digestive balance. Again, that's because it's not registered through the EPA. It can't be marketed as a Nosema treatment. But these are things that are out there which people have had good success with. So you've got to trickle it, and you've got to go do it once per week for 3 weeks. So it is labor intensive in that sense. Terra Myosin is an antibiotic, oxytetracycline, and it is used as a treatment for, or I should say, it's a prophylactic basically for American foul brood. Sometimes you can cure up a outbreak of American foul brood, but it really is used prophylactically as to prevent an outbreak of American foul brood. And you can also use it if you've got European foul brood. The prevailing thought here is that if you haven't started using Terra Myosin, don't start, because all it does is sort of mask the symptoms, and it doesn't really make it go away. It just masks it. So if you ever stop, you're just going to have an outbreak. And so it's sort of the prevailing research says if you haven't started, don't. There is resistance, Terra Myosin resistant American foul brood. There's also some reports that there may be some Terra Myosin resistant European foul brood. So you should be aware of that, and sort of this prophylactic application may be contributing to that. To apply it, you want to take 6 tablespoons, sprinkle it around the top bars, sort of, again, like we did with the Appa Life R, where we put those pieces sort of above the perimeter of the brood nest. We're going to sprinkle this stuff around above the perimeter of the brood nest. on the top bars. You want to apply it 3 times, about every 5, separated by 4 to 5 days. Here's the kicker, though. If you're using this, you absolutely have to have all of it gone 45 days prior to a surplus honey flow. So in other words, if I applied this 7 days ago, and just now today the bees consumed all that Terra Myosin, I would not be able to apply honey supers for another 45 days. So you need to be aware of that. You need to think about this stuff early in the spring if you want to apply it, or apply it as a fall treatment so that they're going into winter. Guardstar, this is for small hive beetle. It's not applied in the hive. In fact, it's toxic to bees. You want to apply this around the perimeter of the hive, because what happens is the hive beetle larvae actually migrate out of your colony and go into the surrounding soil. They burrow down into the surrounding soil to complete their life cycle, where they develop from the larva to the adult beetle. And so you apply this to the soil around the perimeter of your colony, so when they burrow into that soil, that's where they're affected. That's where the treatment takes place. Because it's toxic to bees, you don't want to use like a pump-style sprayer to apply this, because what happens is you kind of create this mist of Guardstar that may enter into the colony, and it is toxic to bees. The best way to apply it is actually get a dedicated watering can, like you might water your flowers with. And that's just basically, it flows out of the nozzle into a sort of a spray where it doesn't sort of become this fine mist. Rather, it's just fine streams where it just hits the soil and you can saturate the soil. You mix about 1 teaspoon per gallon of water. It takes about 1 gallon to treat the perimeter of 6 hives. You want to drench the soil in an area about 18 to 24 inches wide around the hive. And again, that way when the beetle larvae migrate out and burrow into the soil, that's where they'll perish because of this. You should apply this when you first see, or the directions say you should apply this when you first see larvae or hive beetle in your colony, and probably reapply it after rain or every couple of weeks to ensure that any larvae migrating out of that colony will be affected by the Guardstar. All right. The last one in the list is Parham Off. This is paradichlorobenzene, which is different than a lot of mothballs out there. It smells a lot like mothballs, but mothballs, at least most of them, have naphthalene in them. And naphthalene will remain in the colony, or in the wax, and is toxic to bees. So do not use mothballs that contain naphthalene. Make sure it is paradichlorobenzene. Basically what you do is you stack your supers 5 high. You want to make sure they're tight, stacked. There are no gaps where fumes can sort of escape. You want them not setting on a screen bottom board. You want them sitting tightly against the floor or a piece of plywood or something like that, because the paradichlorobenzene, as it evaporates, settles. And so if you've got them up on a screen or something, it'll simply settle right out of the screen and escape from your stack, and thus render it ineffective. So be sure they're sealed. You want to place about 6 tablespoons on some paper or cardboard or something like that, and place it on the top bars of the top super. And then place a telescoping top on, or seal it somehow, so that you've got this chamber, a sealed chamber, and it evaporates and it kills the larvae and adult moths. It will not affect eggs. And so you need to reapply as needed. As these crystals evaporate, you need to apply new ones, so that as those eggs hatch into the larva, they too will be treated. You have to let these supers air out prior to applying them to your hive. Now, this is empty equipment we're using here. There's no treatment for hive bee, or rather wax moth, when it is inside the colony, except for the treatment there is a good strong colony. They will fend it off. This is only in stored equipment that we're applying this particular material. And you have to let it air out before applying it back onto a colony because it is toxic to bees. So if you leave it outside for a few days or in a well-ventilated area for a few days, that should be sufficient to evaporate any residual paradichlorobenzene from the equipment to ensure that you won't have any consequence to the bees. I should mention, I failed to mention back up here with the Appelé Var and the Mitaway 2, that if you're using a screen bottom board, it's advisable to seal that screen bottom board. You can put a piece of, take that Corex sheet and install it. Otherwise, too, your fumes will escape right out the bottom of the colony and decrease your efficacy. That is a whirlwind tour, just under an hour of some of the medications out there and what they treat. Let me pull up my panel here so I can see the list of questions, and we'll start going through the questions that we've got. I'm going to try and just address the ones that are sort of medication related first. Let's see here. Let's see. Okay. Apistan, 1 strip per 5 frame of bees. If there are 2 hive bodies, 20 frames of bees, should you apply 4 strips? Generally speaking, I'd say that if you've got 2 hive bodies, yes, you've got 20 frames, but I suspect that that you will not necessarily have 20 frames of bees. That would sort of be at the peak of the season. However, if you were to apply treat at the peak of the season and you did have 20 frames of bees, then yes, you would do 4 strips. You would do 2 in the bottom chamber and 2 in the top. And if you look at the picture, come on now, there we go. If you look at the picture here, they're putting the strips sort of at a diagonal. You've got, you've got one sort of, they're in a diagonal this way. The second box, you might want to put reverse the diagonal, if you will. So in the second box, you'd put one over here and here so that you sort of created this X with your strips. Of course, 2 in one chamber and 2 in the other, but put them in opposite corners that way if you're treating with four strips. And of course, that would increase the price per hive if you were applying 4. Can you use a screen bottom board with this treatment? I'm not sure exactly what treatment you're referring to, but you can use a screen bottom board with Apistan and Checkmate. If you're using Mitaway 2 or Appelé Var, it's a good idea to seal off the screening to get a little bit better efficacy. What does Section 18 registration mean? It's an emergency registration, and so it hasn't gone through the official approval process. There's often increased paperwork that's associated with it. It's on a state-by-state basis as to whether they want to approve it or not. There's just a lot of things that go on with it, but a lot of times it's just they don't have a lot of the data that a full registration would take. Let's see. So here's a question. This is a question not necessarily about pesticides for treating bees or bee diseases, but rather pesticides for treating perhaps your garden plants where you may have a colony located. Sevin dust is certainly one to avoid. It is very toxic to bees. I often try and go with a lot of the organic type stuff. Not that those necessarily are always been safe for bees, but you've got a better chance. You know, there's a lot of stuff out there like BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, which is powder, which is very good for things like broccoli and Brussels sprouts and all your those sorts of plants. There's also a lot of other organic options out there for some of your other garden pests. Again, not necessarily that the organic are always safe for bees, but you can find some nice alternatives in that regard. With Superside, must you pull each frame to apply? Yes. And how do the bees respond to this treatment? Become aggravated, offensive, to threat? You do need to pull every single frame and try and get good coverage of all the bees. The better coverage you get, the better treatment you've got. Now, certainly drenching them is not going to be beneficial, but you want to get good coverage of the bees. They generally don't get too nasty about it because they're covered now with this solution and they're more focused on sort of cleansing themselves than they are going after the source. Much like misting down a package where they're more focused on preening one another than going after the beekeeper. Let's see. Please review your recommendations for mite levels which indicate need for treatment. The recommendations for mite levels this time of year, if you're doing a sticky board, you're looking at, of course, you know, if you listen to our last talk with Kim Flottam, trending is almost as important as the actual number that you're finding at any particular time. But trending is a critical. But generally, I say if you've got a sticky board that's got 50 to 60 mites in a 24-hour period, you need to take some action. Do you recommending alternating treatments or sticking with one single treatment? Alternating is a very good idea, especially with the hard chemicals, because that's where you can develop resistance. And so if you always apply the same thing, you increase your chance of resistance. So it's good to switch between Apistan and Checkmate, but it's also good amongst the soft chemicals as well. You know, I alluded to the fact that the temperature ranges, at least if you're in the south, it makes sense. Mite Away 2 makes more sense in spring than it does in fall. And so if that's the case, then you can use Apilar in fall. But you may not need to treat twice a year, so then maybe switching it up, using Mite Away 2 1 year, Apilar the next is always a good thing, yes. What medication should a beekeeper keep on hand? Whew, that's a good one. Well, I would say, if you're staying on top of things, this is Paul. Paul, if you're staying on top of things, you shouldn't really be in that sort of predicament, hopefully. Monitor your mites. That's where we're really going to run into trouble. Monitor your mites. Make sure that your level isn't increasing. Again, it's that trend over time. If you see it increasing exponentially, you know you need to take action, and that may be the form of drone trapping if you want to use IPM. It may be in the form of powdered sugar dusting, which I guess technically you could call a medication of sorts. And so you won't find yourself in that bind. I'd hate to say, well, you ought to have this on hand just in case, because most of these things have shelf lives. Generally speaking, you know, it's anywhere from 1.5 years to longer. But I'd hate for it to say, okay, let's keep Might Away 2 on hand just in case, or Apple FR just in case. But then you never use it because you're using IPM. Well, you've wasted that money. So that's sort of a tough one. I think that if you're conscientious, monitor what's going on in your hive, you'll have enough time to get what you need in hand to treat that colony. Are you referring to both Nosemas? Both Nosemas, Fumagillin B is effective against both Nosemas. However, they are working on revising recommendations for Nosema serrana, which is one of the newer one, which is been around for a long time. It's not really new, but it's new to beekeepers here in the States in terms of our awareness. And it is effective against that, but it takes a higher dosage to treat that. The Appa herb, I mentioned studies done in Europe. That is also effective against both Nosemas, based on those studies which were conducted in Europe. Let's see. Instead of using Guardstar or similar, will landscape fabric placed under the hive serve the same purpose to deter beetles? Well, I think what would happen is that they might actually make it across that landscape barrier in seek of ground. Honestly, I'm not quite sure how far they're capable of migrating, so to speak. But if you just simply put a 3-foot barrier around, they may cross that. The reason why they don't necessarily cross the 24-inch or 18-inch barrier that we've created with the Guardstar is because it's not necessarily a physical barrier. They come in contact with it after they're in the soil. So they don't really know it's there until it's too late, so to speak. Whereas landscape fabric, it's a physical barrier. They're going to seek to burrow in, and they may try and cross that. Certainly you can try it. How about Apagard? Apagard is another thymol-based product. It is a gel product that basically gets applied to the top bars of your hive. It takes 2 gel packs for a complete treatment, so it would take 3 trips to the hive. Cost, I'm not quite sure on the cost. It's not a product we carry. That's a product that is distributed by Dedant. It's 3 trips to a hive. Cost per hive, not exactly sure. There was a study done in where was that? Serbia, I believe, that found that actually you have higher residue concentrations with Apagard than you do with the Apalivar. And the reason for that is that the bees actually go into the gel because it's a foreign substance and try and remove it from the hive, and in doing so they track it all throughout the hive, and also then that gel material as well. And so you have higher residue rates after a treatment with Apagard than you do an Apalivar treatment. And so that's one of the downsides to it. It's got a similar issue with temperature sensitivity because it works with evaporation. And there's also a little bit of concern about the carrier, the gel that's associated with that product. But it is a thymol product that's out there and available. What do you know about Crisco patties for tracheal mites? Basically, you mix up some sugar with a little bit of Crisco, and what happens is the oil covers up the bees and interferes with the mite's ability to move from bee to bee and get into the tracheal pores of the bee, because they like to go after the young bees. The mites, when seeking a host, like to target bees that are 4 days old or less, and so they try and move around amongst the bees, and the Crisco oil sort of interferes with that. And so it is a very effective, very cheap way of treating for tracheal mites. But frankly, tracheal mites are not necessarily the issue that they once were. That's not to say a colony can't have tracheal mites. That's not to say a colony might not succumb to tracheal mites. But a lot of the tracheal mite issue has been dealt with in the queen breeding operations. That queens have been selectively bred to be resistant to tracheal mites. Again, it's not to say that you might not have problems, but that has been addressed in that manner and helped us tremendously. Where is the mite away pad placed while honey supers are on the hive? You have to pull the honey supers off the hive while applying the mite away tube. You can't have honey supers on the hive. You can add honey supers immediately after treatment. You can't harvest that honey for 14 days after the treatment, but you can put them on. And again, that's just to allow a little bit more time for that formic to evaporate. Please explain powdered sugar treatment. Essentially, I don't know how it came about, but years ago, someone discovered that powdered sugar dislodges mites from bees, that it plugs up their feet and they fall off the bees. And for years, we used that as a method for monitoring mites. The sugar shake, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, where you put bees in a jar with some powdered sugar, shake them around, and the mites become dislodged. You shake out the sugar, and you count your mites. Well, someone out there, beekeepers, being as creative as they are, said, well, let's take the sugar shake and apply it to the colony level. So they began dusting their hives with powdered sugar. They put powdered sugar on the top bars. They take a bee brush and sort of sweep it down between the frames. It falls down onto the bees, dislodges the mites. The mites fall down through the hive, through a screened bottom board, and out of the colony. And that's essentially the premise. And now there's actually equipment that can be used to dispense that powdered sugar. That's the premise. It's very effective. It's how often you do it. Its effectiveness depends a little bit on what you're trying to accomplish with it. If you just want to keep the mites down to a manageable level until you can apply one of the medications we talked about here this evening, then you don't need to do it as frequently. If you want to use it as your sole treatment, you should ought to do it every couple of weeks to knock your mites off those bees. Let's see. Hood beetle trap. I put that into I would put that into IPM. Where it's not necessarily a medication, but it is a very effective method of controlling hive beetle. It's a trap that gets inserted into a frame filled with mineral oil and apple cider vinegar that attracts the mite or the beetles rather, and they die in the oil. But that's not really a medication as much as an IPM technique. Let's see here. What is the min-max number per day count for Varroa that would indicate a treatment is absolutely necessary? Again, I would say 50 to 60 mites per day on a sticky board would be sort of the threshold that I would use for this time of year. If you opt not to feed Fumagillin B in the fall, how much honeybee healthy would you feed? That 16 ounces mixes up 24 gallons, and so you're looking at just two-thirds of an ounce per gallon is the rate you want to mix up. So that's going to be that'll probably be close to maybe a tablespoon or so. Well, no, it's going to be more than that. But it's about a two-thirds of an ounce that you want to mix into a gallon for feeding a colony. Let's see. Oops. Come on now. All right. person had foul brood in their hives, which they dealt with by burning it, which frankly I think is probably the best way to go. You can try and treat, you can try and use the Terra Myosin, you can try and use Tylen, which is another antibiotic that can be used. But ultimately, for peace of mind, I think it's easier just to bite the bullet and burn it. So kudos to you. But now they've also got other hives in the area, and so they started treating those hives with the Terra Myosin, and that probably is a good course of action. But now that you've started, you've got to make sure that you're diligent about continuing that treatment, because it may only mask the symptoms, and if you stop, it may take off again. Now and again, that's sort of the prevailing thought, that once you start, make sure you keep regular treatments going to ensure you don't have an outbreak. Is it dangerous to the bees to spray fruit trees in a bee yard? He was told that late evening was best. Late evening would be best after all the bees are in the colony and not out foraging. However, if you've got blossoms, say apple blossoms, and you've sprayed them, those bees certainly will go and visit those apple blossoms the following day and may pick up some residual pesticides. So you should be aware of that. You want to be aware of how you're spraying and where the drift is going. You don't want the pesticide drift going toward the colonies that may have possible ramifications for the health of those bees. How do you know if you need to treat for tracheal mites? That's a very good question, because frankly they're microscopic. Not many of us own a microscope to do a dissection to determine whether we've got a problem. One of the best symptoms, but it's not necessarily a very conclusive one, is bees crawling on the ground maybe 3-4 feet, 5-6 feet from the colony. And what happens is that the tracheal mites sort of plug up the trachea of the bee. As the bee goes to fly, it gets winded. It's out of breath because it can't get enough oxygen through all those tracheal mites, and so it sort of descends down to the ground and begins to walk back to the colony. And so you see these bees sort of walking around, large number of bees walking around outside the colony. That's a good sign that you need to treat for tracheal mites. But you may have just some old decrepit bees that are going off to die that are also walking away from the colony. So that's sort of the hazard there. Is liquid fence safe for discouraging deer? I know that actually, I think it's the peach orchard up here that's all he uses. We have a terrible deer problem. That's all he uses for deer. I'm not sure, honestly, if that's bad for bees or not. I know I've got stuff that's called, that's basically a mixture, well, sort of gross, various urines and stuff that, of course, discourages deer, and that is safe for the bees. What can be used for prophylactic treatment for AFB as not currently using Terra Myosin? The best, it's not a guarantee, but the best defense against American foul brood is a good comb rotation regimen. In other words, get the old comb out of your brood chambers. I say every 3 years you should have a complete turnover in your brood comb. That's not to say on the 3rd year you yank out all your frames and replace them with new, but every year try and replace the 3rd oldest frames from your colony, and so at the end of 3 years you replaced 100% of those frames. Some people say 5 years. 6 of one, half of the other. If you want to do it on a 5-year rotation, that's fine. It works a little easier if you're using 10-frame equipment. Just try and purge 2 frames a year out of your brood chamber, out of a single box. What that does is it gets a lot of that wax out of there where a lot of the spores, the AFB spores, are going to reside. And it gets a lot of the cocoons that are in those brood chambers out where a lot of spores reside. And so you're keeping your spore count lower than if you let that comb persist and those spores gradually accumulate over time until you have an outbreak. So a good, healthy comb rotation regimen's the best way to deal with foul brood, or prevent, I shouldn't say prevent, but reduce the chances of a foul brood incident. If you have only 5 to 7 Varroa on a sticky border in a 24-hour period, should you be concerned about treatment? I would say that's wonderful. Okay, so here we are. Now we're getting into opinionated based questions. They're asking what my opinion is on powdered sugar versus chemicals for Varroa treatment. It depends a lot on the individual person. Powdered sugar is going to be a lot more labor intensive and require a lot more time than chemicals, regardless of whether it's a soft chemical or a hard chemical. It's going to take more time. And so do you have that sort of time to commit? Are you going to be that conscientious and thorough to make sure that you're out there when you need to be to apply that powdered sugar to ensure that your Varroa population doesn't get to a critical level? These are questions that only you can answer to determine whether it's good for you. Now, the problem is here, the question says, what's my opinion? I've tried powdered sugar a little bit. It works well. I tend to use either the Apelifar or the Mitaway 2 as my mite treatments. That's what I tend to use. Let's see here. How should I store leftover or extra Checkmate or Apistan? Wrap them up in the packaging as tightly as you can and keep them in a cool, dark place. Let's see. What does the larva look like for the application of Guardstar, and where do you find the larvae? You're going to find them they're tiny. I mean, we're only talking about ½ an inch, so you're not going to find them in the soil very easily, but you'll find them in the colony. Hopefully you won't find them in a colony. A good, strong colony of bees should be able to fend off small hive beetle. You may find a couple of larvae tucked away in a corner that the bees have a difficult time getting to. You may see adult beetles scurrying about, but those beetles are being pursued by the bees, and should they lay eggs, the bees are taking care of those eggs before they hatch and become a problem. So a good, strong colony ought to deal with hive beetle okay. But the larvae are about ½ a centimeter. Let's see here. I think we've got some pictures. So here we are. Here they are. Here are the larvae, and to put it in perspective, you know, there's a larva and here's a cell. And they're going to get a little bit bigger than this, but they're about a ½ an inch or so, maybe just shy of a ½ an inch in length. And let's see here. Whoops. Go back to this. Is there a way to record the presentation? Yes, I've actually, I've got the website up here. Oops, I keep, I need to get my pointer back. There we go. This is our resource section of our website. Here's our homepage, resources. We've got a video library that I added when we updated our website. You can see here are all the past webinars, and give me a day or so and I'll get this one up there, and you can see the rough run time. Generally the webinar only takes an hour, but it's all the question and answer that runs beyond that. So it will be available there in another day or so. Let's see here. um, uh, so this person just suggested that I mention a discount that we've got running. It's true in celebration of the new website. There is a discount code that you can enter in to, let's see here, just real quick, we'll buy something, buy one, sure, right here, the promotion code. If you enter in, Alan, this is embarrassing, I can't remember what the code is. Do you have it? And post it, and I'll mention it. But you enter that code right here, you'll get a 5% discount during the month of July. Most of you probably saw that in the e-flyer, because I do that occasionally. I'll also sometimes put in promotion codes in the response, the follow-up email after the webinars that you get the day after you've participated in one of these. I'll often put in discounts there as well. Let's see. Let's see here. This is a long one. I apologize. So this is a question about a special stand that would prevent hive beetles from getting into the hive. The problem is, no, a special stand won't prevent hive beetles from getting into a hive. You may prevent the larvae from leaving. The beetles can fly, and so they can easily enter into a hive, and they can travel, I think they say like 15 miles in a single flight. So they're quite good flyers. And so they can easily land on the landing board just like a bee. So a special stand isn't going to help the deterrence of hive beetle. Thank you. Thank you, Thomas, for the compliment. This says a sugar shake really agitates the bees. It can a little bit, but you dump them inside the hive. They usually are okay because they start preening one another. Let's gallons of sugar. Okay, so back to the honeybee healthy instead of fumagillin B. If you get a gallon or two, similar to Samuel, similar to the fumagillin B, if you get a gallon or two of the sugar solution with honeybee healthy into those bees, depending on fall or spring, that would be good. But again, it's not necessarily, it is not a Nosema treatment. It's just anecdotally, people have had very good success with it. This had bees walking on the outside of the colony. Does this warrant concern for tracheal mites? If they're on the outside of the colony, no. They could be crowded in the colony. They could be trying to fan the colony to cool them off. Let's see here. I'm going to skip that one a little bit. It's a little off topic. I'll come back to it if I've got time. Do you recommend menthol for mites? For tracheal mites, it is very effective. If you're using one of the hard chemicals, the Checkmate and Apistan, I would recommend using the menthol to treat for tracheal mites as well. If you're using the Apilivar or the Mite-Away 2, I would say that you could probably forgo the menthol because those will help with the tracheal mite problem that you may or may not have. Unless you do a dissection, you won't really know. How do you prevent wax moths? Wax moths, a good strong colony is the best defense against a wax moth. If you're storing equipment, the Parham Off. Is Superside a chemical? It is a chemical. We've put it in the soft chemical category because of its mode of action. It doesn't necessarily interfere with the metabolism or the inner workings of the organism. It actually works by dissolving the waxy coating. So it's considered a biochemical and thus a soft chemical. Let's see. Have you tried nematodes for small hive beetle? I have not. But I'm not sure of anyone who out there that is, honestly. Let's So if you've been called to take a hive out of a tree, the comb is obviously old. Should you consider the likelihood of American foulbrood? Yes, you should. What you can do is, if you're going to save that comb, which obviously it sounds like you are, I would rotate it out as quickly as possible and get them on new foundation once the brood has emerged. And if you're not going to use the comb, then it's less of an issue. Is there a treatment for wax moth? Not in the colony, except for a good strong colony. A good strong colony is the best defense against wax moth. If you're losing a colony to wax moth, there's something else wrong. Either your queen's failing, your varroa count's too high, or your colony is otherwise unhealthy. If you've got wax moth problems in stored equipment, that's where Parham Off will help you. I found one larva on my sticky board. Should I be alarmed? One larva? No. I guarantee you that if I went through all my colonies, I'd be able to find at least one larva of wax moth in somewhere in those colonies, because they can't get to every single one. What they do, though, is once it starts to get into the comb, that's when they get it and deal with it. So the code for the end until the end of July is PC NEW Web 5. PC New Web 5. If you enter that into this area right here, you'll get a 5% discount off your order through the end of the month. Let's see. Boy, a bunch of people jumped on posting that discount code. I want to thank you for that, really. Let's see. Unfortunately, here's a question about the free hive tool that we offered last year in our Christmas card. That you have to call in to receive, or there's an area, I can't go too much further without actually getting carried away with my order here. There's an area for special instructions. If you just request that that promotion be added to your order, we can certainly do that. We weren't able to do that through the website because it's a one-time only type of offer. Let's see. When would one might be concerned for tracheal mite if the hive dies off? If the hive dies off, there's no concern at that point. Tracheal mites are not going to spread to a new colony that is installed on that equipment. But hopefully we can prevent that colony from dying off initially, either through observing what's going on outside the hive, and also using something that may work against tracheal mite, either the menthol grease patties that we talked about earlier, or the Apolite Var in Midway 2. Let's see here. So yes, the discount for the 5% web orders only, but this person said, but the girls at the 1-800 number are forgiving if I make an order entry error. That's good to hear. We try. Let's see. Let's see here. Cruising down. What does wax moth larva look like? We'll jump back to this. Pests and diseases, wax moth. Whoops, I'm obscuring my own. Do I not have the pictures posted up here? Where are my pictures? I apologize. Let me see if wax moth. Let me pull up another. Actually, let me do this. Let me pull up another talk real quick. Wax moth. I think. Where is it? This will work. No. Oh, come on now. There it is. Wax moth looks like it's ugly. Wax moth. So the larva, this is an extreme case. They build these cocoons all over the place. but you're going to look for sort of this cottony web running through your foundation. This is a really extreme case. But this is the sort of thing you want to look for, this cottony web just going through the cells of your foundation, or of your comb, rather. Let's see here. Any news about guests we suggested during the last webinar? We're working on it. It takes a little bit to coordinate schedules, but we're working on having some guest speakers other than just myself. The next webinar, this person's asking about the next webinar, is next week, and it's about harvesting and extracting. Alan wants Steve Forrest to appear in one of these webinars. He is a self-proclaimed technology, well, he calls himself, I'm not saying anything that he hasn't said publicly himself. He's a low-tech redneck is what he calls himself. So we might have a difficult time getting him in here, but we'll see what we can do. Let's see. That's all of our questions regarding. That's all our questions regarding medications. So I want to thank you all for signing in. I hope you found it useful. I hope it cleared things up a little bit. I'm sure there's still a lot of questions out there about medications. Please feel free to contact us. Medications is one of those things that really is daunting. There's just no way around it. And when we can try and help you out. We try not to make recommendations for the reasons that I've already stated, but we can certainly try and provide some insight that might get it a little easier for you. So thank you very much, and hope to see you at the next webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.